What's up, everyone? My name is Andrew and I'm the host of Food with Friends. Welcome to part 2 on Michael's story. If you missed part 1, I recommend going back and watching the prior video, where we get to learn that as a 6th grader in the Bronx, Michael became determined that he was going to become a physicist, and he made it happen. In part 2, we'll learn about how Michael fulfilled his dream of flying without ever getting in the cockpit of an airplane, what it was like starting a startup in a garage in Silicon Valley, living the dream, and his story of helping co-found a solar energy company.
While I was at Berkeley, I took up hang gliding. They had a Berkeley hang gliding club, and that was really fun.
Yeah. Why hang gliding?
Well, I always wanted to learn how to fly. That was when I was in 6th grade. I decided I wanted to become a physicist, and I also had a bucket list of other things I wanted to do. And one of them was learn how to fly an airplane. Mm-hmm. And airplanes were just too expensive to take lessons or learn to fly. So when I saw a hang glider in Sproul Plaza at Berkeley, I thought, this is a very inexpensive way to learn how to fly.
Yeah.
So I joined the club and trained for a while and learned how to fly a hang glider and used to go for flights out in the Sierras.
Oh my gosh, that must have been beautiful.
It was really nice. Kirsten went one time too. She went on a tandem flight. So my instructor was steering the hang glider. It was an extra big hang glider.
That's when it's got the 2 spots,
yes.
Right?
Yes. So he was steering and she was a passenger.
Did she like it?
I think she did, yeah. You're running off a platform that just suddenly drops out from under you.
Yeah.
So it's a little scary doing that.
Have you continued doing your hang gliding since you?
No. Kirsten's family, when Kirsten and I were very serious about each other, we'd been together years, and Kirsten's family didn't like me hang gliding because they felt it was too dangerous.
Yeah.
And so they wanted me to give up hang gliding. And so I realized it is dangerous because at that time, a couple of people I knew, including one of my instructors, had died hang gliding. So I gave it up.
Yeah.
And haven't gone back to it. But I still think sometimes maybe when I'm retired, I'll go back and pick it up again. But hang gliding has actually died out in popularity, and paragliding is now much more popular.
Okay.
That's with just the soft wing parachute, basically a shaped parachute.
Okay.
It's shaped like an airfoil.
I saw some people in San Diego doing paragliding from Gliders Port. Yeah. Relevant name, Gliders Port. But I wasn't sure because I always hear hang gliding and paragliding, and sometimes my brain goes, oh, it's the same thing. But no, soft chute is paragliding.
Right, and the rigid frame is hang gliding.
Got it. The pizza slice,
right.
Not really. It's a little bit more aerodynamic.
The pizza slice is old-fashioned hang gliding. That was back in the 60s, in the early days.
Okay.
Since then, the hang gliders look much more like wings, like airplane wings.
Oh, okay. Got it.
They're a lot more stable and safer.
Yeah.
And most pilots fly with a parachute now as well.
That's probably a smart idea.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any rough instances when you were hang gliding where you were like, uh-oh, this might not end well?
Well, the worst thing that happened was one time when I was coming in for a landing, I stalled out the glider too early. And the glider went up and it went down. And then rather than pull my legs up and let the glider take the fall, I tried landing on my feet. And it was, and the hang glider, the weight of the hang glider was still on my shoulders. So I wound up stretching out my plantar fasciitis. Basically, it's a tendon that goes along the arch of your foot. So basically, my arch just got squished down to the ground and stretched out the tendon. So that I did physical therapy and I had orthotics after that for a couple of years, actually.
Oh man!
But that I got off easy compared to other people.
I was gonna say, all things considering, I feel like it could have gone a little worse. What has it been like working in Silicon Valley?
Fairly exciting. This is really sort of the epicenter of high tech in the world, and there's everything you need to do a startup is here. Yeah. There's garages for rent. I did a startup in my own garage here in Palo Alto.
That's like the Silicon Valley dream.
Right. And I would occasionally walk down to the garage where Hewlett Packard started. It's not that far away.
I'll have to stop by there.
Yeah. There's venture capitalists all along Sand Hill Road. It's usually, I've never done it. I don't believe in venture capital, but
Really? How come?
because from everything I've heard and read, uh, founders of companies usually get kicked out by the venture capitalists. The venture capitalists basically take control of the company, and they start making decisions, and they eventually, in most cases, they eventually kick the founder out and bring in
Got
their
it.
own team of professional managers. Now, usually the founder makes out quite well financially, but still they often lose their company.
What were you building in the garage?
Um, well, my first job out of grad school, I worked for a materials science company, and they made resettable fuses.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a resettable fuse in every laptop computer at the USB ports. And they're also in all the phone lines, and they're in your car. They're largely replace fuses in your cars.
A resettable fuse.
Right. So the idea is that
If there's a surge.
if there's a surge, it goes open, and then after the surge goes away, it resets itself.
I never knew that. I'm familiar with, the
Right. The
boom,
blow
you blow
fuse,
it and
right,
you're done.
Right. Yeah.
So that's in most USBs, most cars, most technology now.
A lot of technology. Yeah. It's a $10 billion market now. That and the self-regulating heaters, which is the other product that Raychem makes.
Okay.
So I had ideas for how to make a better resettable fuse. So that was my startup. So I worked for about a year in the garage and came up with a fuse that was a factor of 2 better in a certain aspect. Essentially, it could work at much hotter temperatures than anything on the market. And then when I tried to license the technology, I wrote a patent.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tried to license the technology to companies, I found out that that wasn't really a market need. There wasn't a market need for a fuse that had much higher temperature rating, which was sort of a lesson that you should always invent to fill a market need, not invent what you thought would be something the market would need.
It sounds like something the market would need, but
It did to me too.
yeah.
But the market didn't need it, so I was out of luck.
So you spent a year working on that. Then after you went to the market to try and find a buyer, and apparently that wasn't a market need. What was your next step after that?
Well, then I went out and researched what are the market needs. And so one market need was to have a higher voltage device, a higher power resettable fuse. So I worked on that for a year, and I developed something that was comparable to the fuses that were on the market, but it wasn't factors of 2 better.
Oh,
okay. Since it was only comparable, there was no market need for it. People really needed one that was factors of 50% to factor of 2 better.
Okay.
So that startup also didn't survive.
Yeah, but I'm sure you learned an incredible amount of, not only how the market works, but also around that type of technology. I'm sure your knowledge bank went through the roof.
Well, I think one of the most worthwhile aspects of doing that was I realized that I don't need a company behind me to do significant things or to try significant things. Like I was sort of like a kid who was afraid to walk too far away from their parent.
Yeah.
So I was thinking I needed a corporation in order to do significant things or to try significant things. And so I basically learned how to do everything myself, from sweeping the floor to shopping for electronics to writing patents to building stuff with my hands. And so that was really the best part of the experience, was learning how to stand on my own 2 feet and do everything myself.
So then, all right, so you tried those 2,
Right.
and they didn't work out the way you'd hoped. What was your next step in Silicon Valley?
So the next thing was, at that time, it was becoming more and more clear, excuse me, that climate change was a big problem. In fact, probably one of the biggest problems that mankind faced. And so I decided, with my background in solid-state physics, experimental solid-state physics, the place where I could have the most impact, have the best bang for my buck, was working on photovoltaics, essentially semiconductors that transform sunlight into electricity.
Okay.
The idea being that it can replace some of the gas and oil that's being burned. Um, so I applied to solar energy companies,
Yeah.
and I told them I would happily sweep the floor at first,
Yeah.
since I didn't have any background in photovoltaics. And so a company hired me, and I worked there for 6 months. Um, and the company, this was now at the time when there was a financial crisis during the end of George Bush's presidency.
Yeah.
And the company couldn't raise any more financing, so they went out of business. Um, so that was the end of that company. It basically went under. And so I applied to a second photovoltaic company. I worked there 6 months, and they basically went under. And then I applied to a third company, and same story. They went under sooner or later. And then I got together with some friends that I'd met, and we co-founded our own solar energy company.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened up my lab and did some of the work for that there.
Yeah.
What happened there was we showed our product. Our product was to measure the current voltage characteristic of a solar panel in the field,
Okay.
and wirelessly relay the data back to the central station.
Oh, so you can tell if you need to adjust it all.
Adjust it, or if something is going wrong with the panel, you could figure out what's going wrong.
Got it. Yeah.
We made that, and it worked. And we showed it at a trade fair,
Mm-hmm.
and a Japanese company expressed interest in licensing it. So they wanted to they wanted our demo model to take back to Japan and test.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was a good idea to let them take the demo model without some kind of IP protection. So I finally convinced the other people that co-founded the company that we should have the Japanese company sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, protecting IPA. So we did that, and we gave them our prototype, and they took it back to Japan, and we didn't hear from them for over a month. So finally, our CEO calls them and asks what's up. And they say, well, we've tested your device, and it's not quite ready for the market, which we knew. And they said, and besides, we're developing our own device that does something similar, and so we don't need your device anymore. And so that was the end of it. Actually, that wasn't the end. About a year later, we were actually able to license the technology to another company in America.
Okay.
So we each got a small amount of money,
Yeah.
nothing to retire on, but a nice sum of money. And then that was the end of that solar energy company.
Wow. Tough market?
Yeah, the story is that China had very low labor costs, and they also didn't respect IP. And so they were basically producing photovoltaic panels. They were selling photovoltaic panels for less than it took people in the U.S. to produce them. So the companies just couldn't compete with China, and eventually most of them went out of business.
You do the math there, and it's pretty clear cut about who's going to have the most sales.
Mm-hmm.
Why did so many of these solar companies go under? Just because of the economic, or because of the Chinese companies, or were there other factors that were contributing, in your opinion?
Well, there were definitely other factors. At the time, venture capitalists were throwing money at solar energy startups. And for example, there was a company, Solyndra, that was putting a solar cell inside a glass tube.
Okay.
And the idea was you could catch sunlight as it was coming down, and also as it bounced off mirrors onto the tube. But it wasn't really that much more efficient than a regular solar cell. But they got a big grant from the government, and they got lots of money from venture capitalists, and they were never able to really improve their efficiency of their system. So they eventually went out of business as well. And that was under Obama that they got funding.
Yeah.
So that's actually been held up by Republicans as an example of wasteful spending on solar energy by Democrats.
That's interesting.
Although that was sort of the exception. But so some of the reasons companies failed was they didn't have any good technology.
Yeah.
They basically didn't have a market advantage. Some of them were just poorly managed. Some of them were run by people who'd never worked on photovoltaics before. They were just good at raising money. and they didn't really know what they were doing. And some of them, the technical people didn't know what they were doing. So there were a lot of different reasons why VCs went out of business, but ultimately, even the ones that technically succeeded eventually lost out to China and a few bigger U.S. companies, photovoltaics. So that was pretty much the end of photovoltaics.
Yeah. At that point, you're like, all right, we popped it, we made some money. What's next?
Right. So after that, I decided to go work for a corporation.